Hey guys, Brent Campbell again. This video is years in the making, and I wasn't sure I was ever going to need to make it, but circumstances kind of demanded that I did. Given that the steering wheel is the single most asked about topic on my videos, and it doesn't really have anything to do with M5's, I figure I should devote a video to it, so that's what we're doing here.
And while I'm on this subject, I'll talk about the carbon fiber trim that complemented the steering wheel and the powerful sound system my brother put in the car that was the icing on the cake, followed by my takeaways from addressing all of that again nearly 10 years later.
Most E60 M5's came with trim from the factory. That certainly is not appropriate for the character of the car. So in cases like those, you got to take matters into your own hands. My brother bought this car when he was 3 years old. He wanted to make it special. So he found a fabricator in Turkey who made a custom steering wheel, custom carbon fiber trim throughout the car. After about a year, the bits became loose. Then, a few years later, on a 5-degree February morning, after a cold and slow start, I was driving my daughter to school when the carbon fiber steering wheel began cracking in my hands. Maybe they just didn't take into account weather and changing temperatures.
Okay.
What they basically sold him was the veneer, and it is legit carbon fiber.
Right.
But it's not attached to anything.
Okay.
So when you have changes in temperature, it's going to crack. And I find it perplexing, the options that BMW offered for trim. When this car was new, it had this walnut trim, which is nice for a luxury car, but that's not what this is. The only one that made sense, and this is my opinion, of course, was the brushed aluminum. And if I had that today, I would be thrilled with it. I wish I had it in the M3. Instead, it's called Titan, which unfortunately it bubbles over time and you have to replace it, and that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that you have to replace the trim on these cars. So my theory on this, and this is how I kind of deal with it, is that the German manufacturers invest all their money into the hardware, and by that I mean the engine, the brakes, the suspension, the tires, the things that actually matter for the driving experience. Where they cut costs, it's stupid stuff that unfortunately you see a whole lot. Everything feels cheap in terms of the interior, the creakiness of the plastic. Anyway, my brother bought this car and he saw the interior trim. It was for a luxury car. This is not a luxury car. I don't know. I guess you can debate that. However, it has a racing engine up front and the rest of the car should match. The brakes match, the suspension matches, the styling matches without being over the top, which I appreciate. As a general rule, I have learned that it is best not to modify your OEM car too much because, first of all, you usually don't get your money back, and in times, modifying your car actually decreases its value, and people really want to have as original as possible. And I hear a lot of folks talk about OEM plus, which is a good way to go, but I suppose the way we define plus varies from person to person, so we have to be mindful of that. So I'm hesitant to upgrade the car too much. Not that I'm ever going to sell it, but I don't want to put any money into the car that isn't about maintaining it mechanically, because that is a substantial thing to think about. It's constant, and I don't pay depreciation, but I do pay maintenance on it. And so I don't want to go crazy making modifications that I'll never see any return on. But I certainly don't want to be on the side of the road with a problem. I don't want to have an engine that grenades itself. So I am very proactive about maintenance on my cars, but I don't really want to go out and do a bunch of crazy modifications for it because it negatively affects the value a lot of the time. And there are realities. So we swapped the transmission, which is going to be a video that I'm going to do next. We're very soon. We swapped the transmission from SMG to manual, and really it's the same transmission, but there have been all kinds of gremlins that I've had to deal with. With this car, there are all kinds of electronic gremlins that I've had to deal with replacing the steering wheel. The alternator died, the battery died, and as it turned out, the digital readout on the steering wheel was sucking energy, so when I turned the car off, it would still be sucking energy from the battery and it would cause it to die. So all these unintended consequences that happen when when you modify your car. I shudder to think what would happen if I were to try to turbocharge or supercharge or do some really major surgery, although I read about it happening all the time, and it sounds like it works out spectacularly well sometimes. But it also doesn't work so great other times. As for the stereo in the M3 is laughably bad, but I don't care because all I want to listen to is the engine. And I would make the same argument for this car. However, it's a family hauler, that's how I use it, and so it's really nice to have a good stereo system that we can listen to and enjoy music together. And truly, this is years ago, but on these road trips I used to do with my daughters, I put my iPod in there. It has all of this great classic music in it that I wanted to make sure to educate the kids on. And so we would spend hours and hours and hours driving across this country into the wee hours of the night listening to this amazing stereo with my iPod, going through classics, everything from the Beatles to Elvis Presley to 1980s great stuff to the 1990s great stuff. And they really developed an education of what music was because of this stereo. But aside from that, it hasn't really made sense for me. My understanding is the Logic 7 stereo system in this car was outstanding. My brother's a bit of an audiophile, so he wanted to upgrade. The guy who installed it took this car around as a showpiece. It was all well done custom work, and it does sound amazing. There's a giant subwoofer back there. You can turn this up as loud as possible,
right,
and it won't distort. But
that's nice. You never use it for that, yeah.
But that's the beauty of the road trip, though, is that we really do use the stereo, but it's literally for like 4 weeks out of the year.
We're gonna have to do something one day. We're gonna have to go like to some outdoor event, like in the city, and just post up and bump some music.
There you go.
Right?
But what I need to do is unfortunately upgrade it to Apple Play so that I can play Spotify and the music, because the reality is I just don't listen to CDs anymore. The carbon fiber trim looks great now. It's gorgeous, and far as I can tell, because of the way this new stuff was fabricated, it should stand the test of time. And it cost me a fair bit of money. As a pragmatic individual, I struggle with spending that kind of money on something that is purely cosmetic, but it looked terrible, it needed to be done, and reality is, this was a $100,000 car when new. It's a very rare example of a type of engine, the V10, that we're not going to be seeing any more of. After 2023, my understanding is that all V10s will be phased out. Will they come back? I don't know. They should be, because they sound magnificent. But this is a rare car, and it needs to be treated with the respect that it deserves. So at late March, at that point, just the steering wheel had been installed. And we agreed to wait to install the trim until it was consistently warmer. And so that's what we did. So late April, we installed it. The install was not as simple as it should be. I had planned on installing it myself. I bought the tools for it. Should be no big deal. But because of the way that these panels were installed, they were basically super glued in place, and the old carbon fiber was just a veneer. And in order to install the new pieces, they had to take the door panels off, and it was a nasty process. So again, if you can avoid doing this, do it. But if you've got an E60, unless you got the brushed aluminum trim, you kind of have to replace it. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. But man, is it expensive to deal with, and it is purely cosmetic. It does not add anything to the value to the car other than when you're driving it, you look down and you see something that's nice to look at as opposed to something that's cracked and it's driving you nuts. I value design, obviously, so sometimes you do things for peace of mind. As for what's next, well, I'm not sure yet. For one, I've been thinking long and hard about this, and have all but decided to put a real effort again into publishing videos here. I just love doing it, and I'm tapping knowledge that I've built over 30 years. Now look at the demographics of who's watching my videos, and basically everybody who watches my videos is younger than I am, which means that I have perspective that I used to look up to the older guys to know. And now I'm one of the older guys. So I kind of have a responsibility to pass on what I know to younger enthusiasts. So that's kind of what this channel is becoming. And you all are responding by watching, by commenting, by liking my videos, by subscribing. There was a time a few years ago that I put a whole lot of effort into this, and now that I look back, it's just something that I have to do. And if you have ideas, I always appreciate them. As for future videos, well, I have some friends with some interesting cars that can make excellent counterpoints to both my M3 and my M5. Just as Ilyas's E39 M5 was to my E60 M5. I might do more of those. It certainly would be a good time. Yet the big one that I've got to do is the SMG to 6-speed manual swap that we did on my M3 this summer. Much as I loved the car before, after over 11 years of ownership and 12 years of lusting after one, I love it even more now. It was definitely the right decision. I'll interview Joe O'Neill, the mechanic at JC Auto who did the work on my M3, and a bunch of the other work that's been done on both of my cars this year, as nobody can talk through his work better than he can. Anyway, please subscribe, and I'll keep you guys posted. See you soon. Thanks for watching.